This conference will now be recorded.
Evan Pinkham, I'm a transportation planner with Fort
Dana Horncole, Capital Projects Manager with Fort Collins.
Kim Koivanemi, Senior Civil Engineer at the Town of Timoth.
And Rose Cunningham, Transportation Planner at the North Front Range.
Jonathan Stockberger, Transportation Planner at the North Front Range.
Mark Northrop, Transportation Planner at the North Front Range.
Eric Tracy, Leonard County.
I'm Alex Johnson. I'm a civil engineer for the city of Loveland.
Becky Carrasco, NFRMPO.
And Marco Schmidt, City of Evans. Is there anybody online that would like to introduce themselves? Hearing none. Is there any public comment?
This is Suzette. I did want to introduce our new executive director to all of you. As many of you know, I am retiring at the end of the month, and so Paul Sizemore is our new executive director, and I just wanted to give him the opportunity to say hello and introduce himself to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Suzette. Thanks for the introduction. And like Suzette said, I'm the new NPO executive director. This is my third week on the job, so it's great to be here virtually watching the meeting with all of you.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome aboard. Okay, so is there any public comment, either in the room or online? Seeing and hearing none. We have the next item on the agenda is approval of the May 15th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Dana.
I'll second.
Thank you, Evan. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is air quality, regional air quality updates. Tom, Becky.
I'll let Tom go first.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tom Moore here from the RAC. I mentioned at the last meeting that I thought perhaps my verbal reports on these meetings might not be very helpful. So we've gone ahead and move forward, and we'll be providing for every TAC meeting a brief written report, mostly in bullet format about what air quality work is going on at the regional level. And if I could get direction from MPO staff, what the cadence would be to turn that in, that would be helpful. But we'll produce that on a monthly basis and make it available for the TAC members with the meeting materials. So I don't have one today, but that's our plan, and we can probably start that with the next TAC meeting if that works for everybody.
Yeah, we can talk offline, Tom, about the timing and the deadlines.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
I said we can talk offline about the timing and the deadlines for those reports to go into the packet.
Okay. Do you agree that it would be useful to have such a report? I never got any feedback on that, so I'm just double checking.
Yeah, I think it would be. There's some
okay.
Head nods in the room. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Did we have a hand raised? Is that?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Tom, I was just curious if the RAC is planning on making any comments on the upcoming procedural rule. And for those of you in the TAC, that means that's how we engage with the Air Quality Control Commission when it comes to rulemaking hearings. So I didn't know if RAC was planning on making any comments on that or not.
Yeah, well, yes, we're going to be involved in the rulemaking, Suzette. Is that what you mean by making comments?
Yeah, I mean they've been having meetings and things like that. So yes, I guess being part of the rulemaking, I didn't know if there was anything from the RAC's point of view that you think is important in that rulemaking that would be worth sharing.
Sure, that's a good question, and I should say, since I won't be there in a few weeks. Congratulations on your retirement. So we weighed in during the public outreach meetings a couple of times on issues we thought were related to the SIP related rulemakings. And we're going to participate in the rulemaking on the rulemaking as it occurs. And we definitely, think the proposed approach that they have, needs further discussion. And but it's an excellent step forward, to offer the ability to have an alternative rulemaking proposal. So that's kind of as far as we've gotten so far.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Brett. Next item on the agenda is, we don't have anything on the consent agenda this month. Next one is action item July 2024 TIP amendment and rules.
Thank you. In the packet. Yes. All right, so the July 2024 amendment to the TIP includes 3 revisions. One is from CSU and 2 are from the city of Greeley. So the CSU is adding a new project, which is the hydrogen refueling infrastructure at CSU with 2.8 million federal CFI charging and fueling infrastructure funds in fiscal years 25 through 27. The revisions from the city of Greeley are the revising the 2 locally funded projects, which are US 34 and 35th Avenue, and then US 34 and 47th Avenue, to add the RAISE grant that they received, and that is in future funding in the tables. And so it's decreasing the amount of local funding that was programmed to that project in both projects. The 30-day public comment period for the TIP amendment began on July 10th and will conclude on August 8th. An equity analysis was conducted by the project sponsor for the new location-specific project, which is the CSU project. And with that, I will answer any questions about the July 2024 TIP amendment.
I glanced through it all, and I'm excited for Greeley to have that money. That's going to be interesting to make that project move forward. Evans is really excited to hopefully participate in some of what's going on there, since we're connected at the hip over there. So if there's no comments or questions, do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Thank you, Dana.
Second.
Thank you, Nicole. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next is presentation. Medora's online for the MMOF program guidance.
Hi, is my audio coming through?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, it's great to be back with the North Front Range TAC. This is Medora Bornhoft. I'm with CDOT in the Multimodal Planning Branch. And you may have heard Michael Snow present on MMOF, and he still is the program lead for MMOF, but I work with him closely within the Multimodal Planning Branch on this grant program. So we wanted to provide some updates to you all on this program. And I know Anna Rose has a presentation later, so I'll try and keep this pretty brief. But key updates include changes to the match qualifications by community, updates to the distribution formula, an updated regional funding allocation, and then guidance on preparing for your next round of project selections. So this spring, the Transportation Commission adopted a few changes to the MMOF program. The first is on match reduction. So as you likely recall, the MMOF program has a very high match rate of 50% for most communities, which is reduced to 25% or 0% based on a pre-established formula. The Transportation Commission did not adjust the formula, but they did change the data to a more recent data set to inform those match reductions, and that got approved this spring. Those final match rates are available on the CDOT website. The other update they made is to the distribution formula to use more recent data, and also slight changes to the urban distribution formula based on feedback from stakeholders and from the stack. Another key change is that previous award distributions made by the TC specifically mentioned funding from certain years, 22 and 23, and it didn't speak to future years of funding. So what they did this spring is brought MMOF into alignment with other grant programs that have steady streams of funds to more explicitly allow MPOs and TPRs to award those future year funds. So this slide shows the projected TPR allocations across the state, with North Front Range third down in this table with just under 8% of the funds. What we are saying to TPRs and MPOs is it is fine to award out to at least fiscal year, or out to out to fiscal year 2028. That is the last year of the 4-year STIP, or Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. So it is fine to award as far out as that last year of the STIP, because that's what can be programmed. We also wanted to bring an update on the status of current projects in the program. This slide shows stats for projects across the state within the MMOF program. So with the 2020 award cycle, we're at about 50% of expenditures for those projects. With the 2022 award cycle, we're only at about 10.5% spent. So it's been slow for these projects to spend out the MMOF dollars, and there are a variety of reasons for that. But one of them is that there is an opportunity for better communication and coordination between project sponsors and CDOT up front to talk about implications for projects receiving this funding source, what it means to go through the contracting and project oversight process through CDOT. And so what we're doing is instituting a review process required for all MMOF applications. And for a lot of areas, including Region 4, this is sort of just a new name on something that's already happened, of good communication between region staff and project applicants. In this review, CDOT staff will be looking at budget, project delivery, and scope and feasibility of the project. Looking specifically at the timelines, whether they're reasonable, whether the cost estimates are reasonable, and any potential delays for the project. This review will not address project merits or any scoring criteria. It's really focused on those key elements identified above. However, CDOT staff are welcome to be asked to sit on a scoring committee and then would weigh in on scoring criteria. The goals of the application review are to help applicants identify project delivery challenges and prepare well-defined and competitive project proposals. We want to reduce the number of withdrawn and delayed projects. We want to reduce the cost for a local agency and CDOT staff to support these projects, and then provide MPOs and TPRs with more complete project information. So in addition to that review, CDOT is providing guidance and support through a program guide, which will be updated on our website soon. We will be providing applicant webinars as an option for entities interested in applying to learn more about the program and about the local agency grant process. We have an application template that can be used at your discretion to be determined by the North Front Range, and coming out to all the TPRs and MPOs throughout the summer to bring this information. This next slide on project selection requirements is not too critical for you all because you already are doing a competitive selection process. But this is a slide that we include just to say that there are requirements through the state controller to have a competitive process for project selection. So we do encourage TPRs and MPOs to identify those evaluation factors up front and hold a competitive call for projects. Next, we have some recommended practices for project selections. And again, this is pretty much old news for you all. So these practices include establishing a call timeline in consultation with CDOT planning staff to ensure there's time for the application reviews, ensuring you have those evaluation criteria determined up front, clarifying proposed priority for any partially funded or waitlisted projects from a previous round, and developing a plan for how you may treat those projects in your next round. And lastly, awarding the full amount of requested funds to selected projects whenever possible, because as we know, partially funded projects often experience more delays and administrative burden in trying to pull together a complete funding package. So these last two slides are reminders of what the program is intended to achieve per state statute. So the state statute does have program goals, and these haven't changed, at least not recently. So the program goals include benefiting seniors, benefiting residents of rural and disproportionately impacted areas, providing enhanced mobility for persons with disabilities, providing safe routes to school for children, and reducing emissions of air pollutants and greenhouse gases. Lastly, eligible project types include fixed route and on-demand transit, both capital and operations, transportation demand management programs, multimodal mobility projects enabled by new technology, multimodal transportation studies, bicycle or pedestrian projects, modeling tools, and greenhouse gas mitigation projects that decrease VMT or increase multimodal travel. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
I have one question. You mentioned some of the delays and things that happen with projects in the current process. Do you have any examples, or are you creating a list of what went wrong so that maybe that can be shared with other applicants?
There often are sort of a series of things that are at issue, and the application reviews that we're proposing are really intended to help identify those issues up front and provide that communication between applicants and CDOT. But you know, it's been a range of issues, and part of it are things outside of anyone's control, with COVID happening and cost escalations with inflation. Those were definitely an impact to delivery of projects in this program. So I don't have a specific list of issues, but that's what that review is intended to help address.
And then I have one more question. In the goals, you mentioned benefit residents of rural, but the breakdown is 81-19. Is there any reason why that breakdown couldn't go 70-30 or something like that? Or is that something that's fixed?
Currently, it's fixed based on what TC approved. And as I said, they approved it for funds going forward until they revisit it. So that is the current breakdown. But I will say that the 19% was set to provide more funds for rural areas. The program distribution formula is based on up to 11 factors. Of all those factors, many of them have a lower rural share than 19%. You know, it ranges from maybe 11% to 19%. So by fixing the rural share at 19%, it was actually directing more funds towards those rural TPRs. And that's how it was selected in the first place, just by looking at the range of those factors and which ones had the highest rural share. But for North Front Range, you're pulling from the urban pot. So,
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just curious. It's more of a curiosity question rather than.
sure
I'm
thing.
sorry, I might have missed this. I saw the amounts that were unspent so far. Do you have an idea of what the pot might be for this year? And I may have missed it if you shared that.
Oh yeah, and I think for North Front Range specifically, Anna Rose will have more information because you've already awarded some of your upcoming funds. But the amounts that are allocated to North Front Range in 24 through 28 is shown here. It adds up to just under 6 million total for that 5-year span.
Medora, with the kind of the eye towards projects that are having a hard time getting across the finish line, is using the MMOF funding as sort of a state match to federal funding, is that an appropriate use of MMOF funds? So let's say you have an existing project that you've already been awarded federal funds, and you'd apply for MMOF dollars to reduce the amount of local match that the jurisdiction is required to pay?
Yes, that is an eligible use of MMOF. It does require some additional logistical steps. Apologies if you hear some back. Sorry about that. I would say it takes some additional steps, and you'll want to confirm with whoever awarded the federal funds that they will accept that MMOF and get that corrected in the contract. We've seen it come through where an agency gets both funding sources. Oh,
Still in there?
Is the allocation percentage related to population, or how does that allocation percentage?
It's based on the formula that TC has set. So I think it's more than just population. She's still there.
oh,
But not talking.
Oh.
apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so Medora, the last thing I think you said was that you've seen it before where a federal agency, they have an IGA set up and then the MMOF dollars throw a wrench in that somehow. Is that what you were gonna mention?
Yes, yes. So if you already have a grant agreement in place with local match, part of the steps to ensure your MMOF can be used as your match is going back to the original awarding agency, confirming that they accept the MMOF as match.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Medora.
Mm-hmm. And to the question on allocation, there are 11 factors that are used. And as Anna Rose said, population is one of them. The other factors, in many cases, correlate strongly with population, but they are used to capture the other elements that are critical to the program, like individuals who are older in age, young children, disproportionately impacted communities. So it covers those different factors that are relevant to the program to determine that distribution. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like there's any here in the room, and I don't see any hands raised online. Thank you very much, Medora.
Thank you.
Next, discussion items, MMOF, love that, MMOF discussions.
Yeah, so if you could go ahead and share. The other presentation, sorry, my presentation. Yeah. All right, well, to piggyback off of that, we're going to continue to talk about MMOF. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So I'm gonna skip past this since we just talked about that, but it's just the MMOF goals. And then to get at the question of the hour is how much funding we have available to award. And so the funding estimates is that first column, and so that's from 24 through 28, we have about 5.9 million, but as Medora mentioned, we have awarded some of those funds already. And the amount of funding here kind of looks strange in that first year because we had originally awarded some funding to, or set aside some funding for the Ride No Code program. They didn't need the earlier year funding, so we've distributed that to some of the later years. And so there was some funds returned back to the pot and some funds awarded. So the amount available is what we have to award in this call currently. So we have a certain amount of funding in fiscal year 2024, which has already ended. And so just want to point that out that those funds would be great to award to a project that is going to be going forward sooner rather than later. And so it's not a whole lot of funding, but it is some. So then we have about 4.5 million that will actually be awarding during this call.
I have a good question. Did Greeley, I thought Greeley got like $8 million for the mobility hubs at one point through MMOF. Was that not MMOF?
So there was a lot of moving around of funding that happened back in 2022, I think. And so that was some of that. They have received some MMOF funding for that, but the bulk of the funding that they were actually awarded for that project ended up coming out of the CMAQ pool, I believe.
Okay.
And so
I didn't know how it, I just didn't know if it counted for here. And I
Yeah.
thought it was the call that it was awarded through.
yes, that they applied for,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So in May, when we initially brought this discussion, we had created this timeline for the potential MMOF call. And then we canceled our June TAC meeting, and there was a lot of just still waiting on some of the information. And so we didn't have a June discussion, and we didn't discuss it with Planning Council yet. And so wanted to provide another option for timeline that pushes it out a month to give us more time to discuss it if we feel like that is necessary. The bulk of what we're going to discuss today is the scoring criteria, so it kind of depends on how we feel about that and what kind of place we get to with that discussion, I think, to be able to decide which timeline we want to go with. And so the first timeline, we would be making those awards in January and the second one in February. So it's pushing it out a month, but like I mentioned, that's going to be already halfway through fiscal year 25 by that point, and we have, about 600,000 in 24 and 25 that we're awarding. So just keeping that in mind that some of those funds are earlier year funding, and so pushing that out could potentially cause some strain, but I think either way is fine with either of these timelines. The other thing about the second timeline, we had tried to avoid this for the last couple of years of having some of the scoring committee meetings around the holidays. And so that would be a little bit unavoidable with that second timeline, just given everything. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, that if we do decide that, we would be requesting potentially there would be some review of applications around the holidays. And so that I know that in the past has created some timing issues for people. So this is the same that I presented in May about the match reduction. There is some changes for this. Sorry, Josie, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I was looking at your last slide and I just kind of want to get some clarification from a CDOT perspective because Bryce will be the one to do these CDOT reviews. So what is the expectation as far as, I guess, the turnaround time? Are you looking for like a 2-week turnaround from CDOT or what does that look like?
Yes, probably. So let's see. I'm trying to remember. We would be requesting the draft applications to be due to the NFRMPO and then sent to CDOT either September 27th or October 25th. And then it's about 3 weeks after that is when the applications would be due. So preferably about 2 weeks so that there is some time between feedback being provided and applications being due for project sponsors to get some feedback on that.
That should work for us. I just want to make sure that local agencies are comfortable with having about a week to make any necessary adjustments.
And I would also point out that draft applications being due is the latest date that it would be due. And so you can always submit that earlier to hopefully get some of that process moving a little sooner. But with that note from Josie and our project sponsors, would that week potentially be enough, or do you think we need to revisit that timing between there?
I mean, it's really dependent on what the comments come back and how good your application was to begin with.
Yeah.
As long as you turn in a good first application, it's probably
Yeah,
good enough.
yeah. I mean, I think people that are doing it for the first time may struggle.
Yeah.
People that have had more experience doing it are going to obviously have a better, shorter turnaround even on the review by CDOT, I would think.
Yeah.
So I guess comments that you do get during that time, it was really helpful. Those were super helpful, but we got hurt on some of our scoring based on feedback that we followed from those meetings. I think just as long as that, maybe it's documented somewhere what the comments were or why, because we made changes to our application related to that, and then the feedback was that hurt our scoring.
Yeah.
So as long as that feedback's being documented somewhere, that we're including those things because they were asked for with the feedback we got, would be a helpful sort of full cycle. So that way the scoring team can know what feedback we got, and that if there's something in the application that was asked for, that's why it's attached.
Yeah. And then the other thing, like looking at these timelines, is I think we wanted to give more time in between when the draft applications are due and when the final applications are due. It would be pushing up that deadline for the draft applications to be maybe, off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure what those, how many weeks there is in between that. But maybe a week to 2 weeks after the applications open, having those draft applications due, so that there's more. Josie?
Anna Rose, is it possible to modify this timeline just so it's clear for us when CDOT needs to return those application for review? I just want to make sure Bryce has somewhere to go, so there's, I don't know. I just worry that 2 weeks will come and go and he's going to get slammed with a lot of these requests because we have 4 planning regions who are all going to be doing similar things. So if we could just put it in your timeline so I have something defensible, that would help.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that we just hadn't came to a conclusion yet on that timing, but we'll absolutely add that in between the draft applications and the applications due of when we would anticipate CDOT providing feedback.
Josie, do you think it'll be this hours model you used last time where you had sort of a scheduled hour with staff? Was that MMOF? I don't remember. No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
The other one.
Yeah, you're thinking of TAP, and that's a call that we run, and so it's a little bit different. This is NFR's call, and so with this one in particular, We won't be doing meetings. We'll just be providing feedback. And if there are questions, we could totally schedule a follow-up conversation, but it won't be as CDOT heavy as TAP.
So then looking at the calendar, and this would carry over into the option 2, but we'll look at option 1. If the call were to open on September 6th, if we had draft applications due instead of the 27th by the 20th, that's 2 weeks after, and then we could say feedback by the first week of October, and then it's 2 weeks later that, sorry, I was looking at the chat. And then 2 weeks after that is when the final applications are due, yes. Which may be, so giving 2 weeks in between all of that might be a little bit better.
Anna Rose, real quick. I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's me again, the interrupter. I also just want to make sure it's known that CDOT review means 2 different things. If it's a transit-related project, it goes to DTR. So, yeah, just take that with what you will.
And that also brings up another question. So the projects that would be managed by the local agency team would be reviewed by our 4 transit projects. That review would need to be done with DTR. And then the question maybe I have for Medora, if she's still online, is other types of programming projects or like planning projects, would that be done by your team or is that just dependent?
Great question. Yes. The guidebook that is in the process of being updated lays out exactly who these contacts are now in this point of time. But exactly right, that construction projects overseen by the region will be reviewed by the region. DTR will review transit projects. We also have OAM this time coming in to review electrification projects and TDM projects. And then any other type planning or programmatic would go through my team.
Great, thank you. And so we'll make sure that all of that, like contact information, is clear depending on project type as we move on. So as we've talked about the match rate, but the one thing that I want to make sure people are aware of is that there is the potential for requesting project-specific match rate reductions, and that is kind of a process. Has to be approved, I think, by TC, and so if that's something that you want to pursue, we would want to start that process sooner rather than later.
What would be the sales pitch for such a project? I mean, basically, you're looking at, I'm not Evans, I'm Garden City. Is that what you're saying? Garden City's down at 0 and Evans is at 25.
So I think the best example of this was Weld County last year or last time with their VS service project. Because Weld County has a 50% match reduction, but given the service they were providing, they provided information about why they should be allowed a lower match rate. And so instead of the 50% match rate, which was required, they received a 25% match reduction.
Gotcha.
So you have to provide justification why you're requesting that. This has also not changed since May or since the last time. Oh, go ahead, Josie.
Sorry, I'm writing that down so that I don't remember to say this to you, but it can wait until the end. But CDOT is also, when the guidebook comes out, you guys will have this information, but CDOT is also centralizing where the draft MMOF applications go. So they will not just come straight to CDOT Region 4. There will be an email address created for MMOF, and it'll go down to our program manager down there, who will then sort and log and track all of the applications received for MMOF around the state. So I just want to make sure that's noted for you, because it won't be me tracking that. It will be my team at headquarters.
Good to know, thank you. All right, so I want to go into the different project types and categories. The way that we conducted the MMOF call the last round is we had the two different types of project categories, and there was scoring criteria based on the type of category. And so the project types and categories haven't changed since we discussed it in May, but I just wanted to quickly go over it. The first category is the quantifiable greenhouse gas reducing projects. So this is projects where we can calculate the emissions reductions from that project. The second type is non-quantifiable or non-greenhouse gas reducing projects. And so the biggest difference in the proposed scoring criteria is that there aren't any points allocated towards greenhouse gas emissions reductions, because these are still eligible MMOF project types, but they don't reduce greenhouse gases. So following the discussion that we had in May, we looked at the scoring criteria and kind of blended the scoring criteria from the 2022 MMOF call and the 2023 federal call to hopefully come up with the scoring criteria that is still more specific than the previous MMOF call was, because it was pretty subjective during the last MMOF call. And so we created a lot more specific guidance on how to score projects in the 23 call. So that is the approach that we took in looking at options for the scoring criteria. So this is the scoring criteria which we had for the 2022 MMOF call. Just put this out of the way real quick so you can see it. And I've taken this same point allocation and applied it moving forward. So none of that has changed. It's just the way that this is calculated has been updated. But if the group does want to change this point allocation, that is a conversation that we can have. So, sorry. No. There we go. This is just the point breakdown that may be a little bit easier to look at. So we'll go through these section by section and talk about if this is how we want to score these different categories. So the first category is multimodal improvements and network connectivity. And so to score the multimodal improvements, we look at if a project facilitates multimodal access to any of those following: activity centers, schools, parks, libraries, transit stations, park and rides, etc. And have the difference between category A on the left and category B on the right, and allowing the kind of discretion of giving up to 10 points or up to 15 points. And that would be based on the project narrative of how many points the scoring committee wants to give for each of these individual categories. The second piece of that is that the project narrative clearly describes multimodal improvements related to MMOF goals, and up to 5 points for that. So those are the two sub-criteria that would relate to multimodal improvements. And then network connectivity is a project closes a gap between two existing facilities or extends an existing facility, or project is identified as a strategic local connection in the most recent active transportation plan. So I want to open it up for any discussion about this set of criteria. Wonderful.
Sometimes the question, well, the harder questions come later.
We can also, as we go through this, we can revisit it. But if there's not any specific questions about this now, I'll go ahead and move on to the next criteria. So this one, we had it called community benefits in the last round. And this included safety and then quality of life and improving public health. We didn't have a great way. So in the 2022 MMO call, we just said 20 points, and you decided what that meant as the person scoring. So at looking at the 2023 call for project scoring criteria, there wasn't really anything that fit those two things, quality of life and public health. And so that's why that's highlighted, because I have the different things for enhancing safety, but really didn't have a good way to incorporate quality of life and public health in this scoring criteria. I think there's two different ways that we could go forward with that. First is just having this be a safety category and using the countermeasures and proactive interventions and then the crash rate like we did the last time. And really those other things, quality of life and public health, are going to come out naturally through these projects of multimodal enhancements, things like that. We also have a section that is for equity, so that's part of that too. And so we can revisit this, but that's why there isn't actually anything under quality of life and public health, because I didn't have a really good way to be able to reflect scoring for that.
I have a question. What if it's not an infrastructure intersection or something like that? What if it's some other new trail that doesn't exist now? There's not crash data in that location. There's not, I guess, quality of life and improved public health, I think, is a good sort of countermeasure or a good alternative if it's not an on-system existing problem. I don't want those projects to get zero. If it's a meaningful trail connection that doesn't exist today, there's not necessarily, I mean, you could tie crash data at this intersection and that intersection and say if there was a connection, those might not happen, which we've tried to do before, but
yeah.
But I think those sort of give an alternative if maybe it's not an existing problem or condition, or I don't know, I think we probably should think about.
Yeah, and so that is a good point, because one thing that I was kind of struggling with is that no serious injury or fatality crashes at a project location. And so maybe the way to move forward with that is that if you have no crash data to be able to use, then, you know, providing that narrative of quality of life and public health to supplement the safety piece of that. And so it would, I'm thinking it would be not necessarily something you can calculate, but really based on the narrative of describing how this project will improve those things. And using that in, you know, if you have crash rate that you can use, you would get up to those 10 points, or if not, you would supplement that with the community benefits and get up to those 10 points.
And I think safety should be a priority and should have a higher score. I think if we are fixing an existing safety problem, that should always be something that scores fairly high.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this could be a good alternative if you're, you know, have a proactive approach to finding connections or safety improvement.
Yeah, and it still splitting out the countermeasures and proactive interventions. So that would be a separate 10 points. And then the crash rate is another 10 points. So total, if you're looking at the community benefits, enhancing safety is like for category A, at least 20 points. Any other thoughts on that approach? Cool. Thank you. Solves the conundrum I found. All right, and so providing transportation equity, and so this is based on the location and the equity index score like we used for the last call for projects. And then, so having a certain amount of points available for actual location, and then a certain amount of points allowed for documentation and detailed description of the benefits and burdens of the project and the community outreach. One of the things we've been using the equity worksheet the last couple years, and one of the things I just am really wanting to get from that is more than just the yes or no answers. The description of project benefits and the description of the potential burdens and the community outreach. I think, the kind of yes or no, will this project create noise? That's good information to have, but I think that I would really like to see a lot more detail in like what kind of outreach you're doing to the community about this project, planned or already existing, and then additional benefits and burdens to justify the project. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay. The next is greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and this is the one that is more significantly different based on category A and B. So this is only applicable to category A, and this is done the same way that we've done the CMAQ emissions calculations in the past. And so the data would be requested by project sponsors to be given to NPO staff. We would do those calculations of how much emissions is being reduced for that project, and then it would be the cost effectiveness of that based on your project cost and the amount of emissions reduced, and then we create the point allocation based on actual projects submitted. And so the project that has the lowest cost per ton would be the highest points, and the lowest cost per ton would get the lowest points, and we'd split everything else out in between. This is the same way that we've calculated greenhouse gas emissions reductions in the past for carbon reduction and MMOF, and this is using the mitigation strategies that CDOT had created during the greenhouse gas transportation planning process. They had created, this point allocation for tons reduced, and so we've used that framework in the project types. And I believe, if I recall correctly, I have a slide on that later to be more specific, but it's not changing how we're calculating that at all.
We had one during, I don't recall what call it was, but it was maybe so that we were adding an additional bus to a route to help increase frequency. And it was showing as a negative benefit because we had more miles. But really, if that bus is more frequent, more people are going to ride it, less people are going to drive. And so the calculation for that one, we aren't going to apply for that one again, I don't think this time. But that calculation, I just thought we're sort of missing the point of adding additional service, or however that was calculated. Yeah. It felt like we weren't really seeing the true benefit of that through that calculation. So I don't know if that's something, we aren't going to apply for that one again this time, but I would, if we had it to do over again, I think maybe that calculation should be revisited to realize the additional frequency of transit service and the benefit it has on the potentially adding additional ridership.
Yeah, and I don't remember if that had been a CMAQ or a greenhouse gas one, but I
think it was CMAQ.
I think it was CMAQ,
Anna Rose, if I'm remembering correctly, it was that we used, it was either the EPA or the FDA. They have a specific calculator that you use for your fleet composition and fuel usage, and that's what really
and
caused.
so the CMAQ program is a lot more kind of prescriptive on the calculations, and they've built out all these tools, which is hard to say if it's gathering all the benefits that we would like to see. But I do think that the greenhouse gas ones are kind of being able to, capture some of that like mode shift. But I also think that like working through some of that stuff, beforehand, hopefully we can figure out how it actually how it makes sense to calculate those reductions.
So there'll be an opportunity to talk to you. We do the scoring and really, what doesn't make sense or what misses.
Yeah. And I don't recall, I don't think I put this in the timeline, but one of the things that after the last call for projects that we had thought would be a good thing to have is sometime in that process, after we've done those calculations, to be able to bring that back as a discussion item for TAC to look at that and kind of have those discussions overall, looking at the emissions reductions and comparing them against each other and making sure that we're not missing something. So I think there should be time in between, like built into that timeline that we can do that, but that would be before final applications are due. So hopefully that'll help kind of get everybody on the same page. And because once again, we'll have new people working on those things, so it helps with getting that. I will interrupt my presentation right now to mention for anybody who doesn't know that I am leaving the MPO. And so I will not actually be finishing out this process.
So, yeah, if there's any issues with this, we'll just blame you after your departure.
So.
No, you have gotten us to a place where I think we can fly now. I think we
Yeah.
are going through these processes so much easier and smoother than we ever have before. We won't let you down. We'll still be probably hard to manage.
Yeah, on that note, Anna Rose, I guess I did want to interrupt and ask, for the last call, MPO put together this really awesome suite of GIS tools. Is that something that you guys can either recycle for this call or do something similar to?
Hopefully, yes.
Okay.
That I am hoping that we'll be able to still use that.
Okay.
That is not something that we've discussed yet, but yeah, Mark is going to be the one that's taking over the call for projects, and he also told me that he loves GIS. So
there you go.
So do we.
I was just going to say, it makes our job a lot simpler for understanding what things need to be in what places. So
yes, so I'm hoping to still just be able to use to update that with maybe more current data, but otherwise I think most of that information in there should still be able to carry forward.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so the next category is integration with local and regional plans. And so split this up into kind of a if or. So if a project is a regional active transportation corridor or identified as a strategic local connection to one of those corridors, that the project scope is in alignment with the specific corridor vision identified in the 2050 RTP, 2021 Active Transportation Plan, et cetera. Or if it's not on an RATC and not a strategic local connection, the project is included in a local plan and project scope is in alignment with the North Front Range MPO plans and increases attainment of our goals, objectives, performance measures, and targets. With the MMO program, there is a little bit of flexibility as far as locations because it is the like safe routes to school, things like that are eligible project types. So these projects do not necessarily need to be on our corridors. So that's why there's the two options where you get up to those points depending on your area. Any questions about that? Lastly is partnerships. And so for the 5 points for partnerships, each financial contributor must provide at least 10% of the required local match. And that's required local match based on the identified project sponsor. So for example, if a project sponsor is required to have $100,000 in local match, A partner would have to provide at least $10,000 if that math is correct. So. That was all of the sections as far as scoring criteria. This is what I was mentioning, that these are the quantifiable greenhouse gas reducing project types, and the GHG calculation method is listed there. And that's, like I said, directly from the CDOT documentation. So really from here, I just want to revisit talking about the timeline, and then I'm gonna scroll back. If there wasn't any major changes that anybody wanted to make on how those points are calculated, other than what we have discussed, just also wanted to revisit this slide to see if this is the distribution of points that we would like to move forward with.
And partnerships is kind of all or nothing to them, right?
Right.
You got it, you got it.
You either got it or you don't.
Yep.
Do the partnerships have to be with other agents, right? You said this, but other agencies are going to be with like the school district or some other local group?
I don't know if we've necessarily specified that, but they do have to be a financial contributor. So it would, specific to that dollar amount provided. So I think that potentially other projects we've had, like school districts providing a local match, and I think that is okay. Yeah.
What if it's private?
No.
So, I mean, you can find somebody's got $10,000 in their pocket.
I don't know if we have specified if that needs to be,
The government.
yeah, like local or public or private. So we could have that be discussed.
I mean, if there's somebody like Montfort or somebody like that in Greeley or something along JBS, they have the ability, and transportation is important for them because they gotta get their people to work, so why not? I don't see the reason why you wouldn't.
Yeah, I think the only thing I am maybe thinking is that could be getting away from the idea behind partnerships, which is really to help facilitate more regional projects, partnerships like necessarily between communities. I don't necessarily see a problem with it, but I think that's really kind of what those partnerships are trying to get at, is like some of those projects that are, bumping up against communities.
I'll bring that up, see if anyone's present.
Nobody is.
No.
All right, so we will be discussing this at the August council meeting, no matter which timeline we go with, but I want to give just another minute to see if anybody has any recommendations for changing this point allocation. If not, I love that, and we can move forward.
Yeah, because I think the top three, the multimodal, community benefits, and equity, they are the really drivers of this whole thing. So moving that, since we don't have any GHG in category B, moving them all into that makes the most sense. I like that.
Okay.
Even though Evans doesn't usually play in the MMOF market, I can't even say it. But I love it.
Cool. All right, I'll go ahead and move back to the timeline. So, the options would be so if we move with option one, we would have one discussion with planning council in August. We would come back to TAC for recommendation or approval at the end of August, and then open the call following planning council's action on September 5th. If we feel like we want to have more discussion, that would all just be bumped out a month, and we would come back next month to discuss again with TAC. I think, so a couple of the other things that we will need to work on is the guidebook development. I don't think that we necessarily will be changing eligible applicants from what we have done before, but that'll be part of the discussion at Planning Council. As far as eligible applicants, we said that it is our member agencies, so all of you, and our partner agencies, so CDOT and or the Regional Air Quality Council, and any other, anybody else who would be interested would have to partner with a local agency, school districts or something like that would have to partner with a local agency. We also haven't discussed application maximums. Lay that out there. There is specific minimums that we've used that are from the MMOF program guidance, and so I don't think that that will change. I believe it was 350,000 for infrastructure or construction projects, total project cost. I think. But we haven't discussed what that maximum would be. If we want to even create a maximum. Medora?
Thanks. Wanted to chime in on project minimums. The program guidance is going to be 300,000 minimum total cost for construction projects, as you said. And for other types of projects, it's 25,000 grant request amount as the minimum. But we encourage MPOs and TPRs to consider higher minimums. Those can be quite low for putting a project through this process. So we're open to you setting a higher minimum request.
So the minimums and maximums would be something we want to work through. Other project requirements, I don't think there will be a lot that needs to change there, but then we'll also need to put together the applications and worksheets. So those are a few things that we'll need to work on. And so if we feel like we need to have that additional discussion before moving forward, then we'd want to go with that longer timeline.
I would say just the last time we went through this, the maximum situation that happened with Greeley, it feels like there was more at play than we were talking about openly in this forum or at the MPO Council. I don't know what the situation was there, but for one community to come in and sweep the whole pot and there to be a huge amount of money that showed up in that pot, that felt odd. And so I don't know what happened there. We normally find a way that everybody gets something, or we sort of make it fair-ish, right, for these calls. They feel like you walk out and you're like, oh, I understand how that went or why it happened the way it did.
Yeah.
That one felt unique. And so I would just say we probably want to talk about maximums unless there's some reason that we wouldn't have that, so.
And I don't, off the top of my head, I don't remember what we had done in previous MMOFs. It might have been half the amount of total funding available. And so if there's anything that anybody would like us to look into before we bring that back, as far as figuring that out, otherwise we can look at what maybe makes sense and then bring that back for discussion.
That one, I think, one community walked away with the whole pot last time, right? Was that kind of?
Or could have, yeah.
Yeah. But did, right, with the.
I think that,
we get 8 million.
yeah, we had, like, there were some like concessions that we made of like splitting project dollar amounts and things like that. And so, yeah.
That, I think it'd be good to just sort of say on the front side before any applications and what generally, again, we want projects that are good, projects that are gonna make our region better. That is good for everyone. And the projects that were awarded there do make our region better, but it felt like there was.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back just to the funding amounts, just to see if potentially if you want to go the sooner timeline if we wanted to make that decision now. So we have $4.5 million available. Yeah.
I think it might make sense to have the maximum be less than half. I mean, even half of that seems like quite a bit. Maybe more like $2 million is the maximum. I don't know. What do you guys think?
And that, yeah, maximum request, maximum award, essentially. And that's per agency, not per project.
Don't get that. I think that was the.
Yeah, because I think the last time it was just maximum period.
Well, no,
Well,
one agency took half, the other agency took the
yeah,
other half.
so you could have a partner project where you're both requesting your total amount of funding available. And so if we're saying that's 2 million per agency, one project could potentially receive 4 million projects, $4 million. We could say, I mean, if that's something that we don't want, it could be per agency, per like project. Determine who got to submit it.
But I mean, just.
They both submitted, right, last time they
Yeah,
both submitted.
there's an option for joint applications for if you're requesting to be awarded your amount, which is separate from partnerships, which is, you know, maybe Timnith providing just a small amount of local match to support a project, where you're not actually requesting the funding. So I think what I'm thinking with the 2 million is we could say per project or agency, like per project and agency. So like Loveland could apply for 2 projects, $1 million each. But no higher than 2 million per project. I'll figure out how to word that, but does that?
I think we're, I mean, that's really at the end of the day, I think we just want it to feel like good projects get funded, right, in a way that they can be made whole, but
yeah,
any one agency walking away with all of the money feels.
Yeah.
I think, are you trying to get away from having projects be underfunded and then fall into the?
I also don't want that, I mean, that,
Yeah.
right, this isn't a huge amount of money for any one project, right? All of us could spend all of that on one project easily. Yeah. It's complicated, I don't think we have the right answer, but maybe just sort of that general, think about equity and how it.
Yeah. Geographic.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I like.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned geography, that plays into it too, because you guys are kind of standalone, because you got that big separation between you and the next neighbors. Whereas we are right next to
In the
you.
middle, yeah,
And
yeah.
we're in the middle of it, so that
Which
has
is a
it,
good thing, I think.
that has its
partnerships are
advantages
good.
from a regional strength.
Yeah. I mean, but you are against unincorporated Larimer County.
Yeah.
That's
Got a lot of
true.
CDOT highways
Yeah.
going through Loveland now.
Okay, so back to this question. If we feel good about those match requirements, would we want to, or the maximum requirements, would we want to go with the shorter timeline, or do we want to just play it safe and go with a little bit longer?
Like you said, we don't play in this fall, but I like the shorter timeline. The reason I like it is because you get the money gets rolling sooner.
Yeah.
That way you have more time to spend it, and that's always the hard part, is spending it on the back.
Yeah, and the
And
process
cleaning it up at
contracting
the end.
General consensus, option 1?
With your guys' staff changes internally and everything, is even you're handing it off to Mark, are you guys gonna be all set to go with, option one if we go with that, or does option two help out staff and you guys' work on this?
I have no opinion on that.
I don't have an answer right now. I literally just spent out this week. This is a project that I'm taking on, so I have some stuff to learn first.
So do we need the longer
Your
term?
how-to book?
Yeah, I mean, I want it to be, we need to have it be good for both, and so.
You all want to think about it, and if one works better than the other, I guess I'd be supportive of either, whatever sort of works for you. I do feel like we've made strides in terms of systemizing all of this and making it easier. So what you've done for the last calls for projects have made it a lot easier for us on the local agency side to go through this process a little bit more quickly, easy for me to say. Being an Alex who does the application. It seems like it's a pretty smooth process, I think. We're flexible, but it might be worthwhile if you want to think about what works for you guys.
So we will be discussing this at the August meeting, like I said, no matter what, August council meeting. And so just maybe recommend, or we always recommend that if you have any specific concerns or things that you want to talk to your council members about, to do that before that meeting. And then also, listen in, join in on that meeting to stay up to date on the process. Okay. That's it for now then.
Thank you. Okay, your next deal. Tip policies.
With this being my last TAC meeting, I really just wanted to make sure y'all didn't forget me. Just take up the entire agenda.
We are really happy for you though.
Thank you. So we wanted to just have a discussion about tip policies because there are a lot of new faces and we didn't adopt a new tip this year, so this wasn't necessarily brought back in front of everybody recently. And so that's kind of what prompted this discussion. So I'm just going to talk through different things related to the Transportation Improvement Program, and please feel free to ask any questions if you have anything that come up. So first, looking at what projects are included in the TIP, and so this is federally funded and or regionally significant projects. The definition for regionally significant is interchangeable with what we call air quality significant, and that definition is shown on the right-hand side of the screen there. It's also projects awarded funding from the NFRMPO calls for projects, and so that's the MMOF program, and then our 4 federal funding programs, so that's congestion mitigation and air quality, surface transportation block grant, transportation alternatives, and carbon reduction program. This also includes CDOT projects that are local agency projects, including the HSIT program, Revitalizing Main Streets, the TAC program, so Transportation Alternatives program that's run through the regions, and then locally funded projects which meet that air quality significant definition. And if you look through the TAC packet, you might have seen that the format of our tables has changed as of last month. This was to help with the accessibility requirements that the state has put into place and kind of just help clean up some of the calculations and everything. So just wanted to bring that in front of everybody to make sure that you are aware of what this looks like. A few things I want to point out that have kind of changed, that are different, is the total funding that is within the active years of the TIPS, that's fiscal year 24, through fiscal year 27 is at the beginning of the tables now. And so that is calculating everything that's FY 24 rolled, FY 24, 25 rolled, 25, 26, and 27. Anything that was prior to fiscal year 24 would be in previous funding. Anything that's after fiscal year 27 is in that last column that's future funding. So when you're looking at that total, it's only going to be that 24 rolled through 27. It doesn't include previous funding and future funding. That's just the active years of the TIP. And then also, this is a super minor change, but just in case somebody was keeping up with this, the revision is switched. They used to be in descending order, and they are in ascending order now, so if anybody cared. So I wanted to talk about the two different kinds of revisions that can be done to projects that are in the TIP. And so that's policy amendments and administrative modifications. So policy amendments are like what we did earlier, which is the larger project changes that have to be approved by TAC and Planning Council, have to go through the 30-day public comment period. And then after all of that approval are able to go to CDOT. And so there are certain revisions that are required to go through that process. And it's things that are, a lot bigger than just the minor changes. And so any project added to the TIP using federal funds, or if the project is an air quality significant project, any project that has all federal funding removed or is deleted from the TIP, and these are all things that trigger the amendment as opposed to a modification. This is the one that I think is most what we see is the addition or deletion of $5 million or more in federal or state funds for any project. A change in funding sources from local or state to include any amount of federal funds. So the revision that we did earlier was replacing the total project cost had stayed the same, but we were replacing $10 million of local funds with federal funds, and so that's why that triggered the policy amendment. And then addition of a new CDOT STIP pool. Any major change to the scope of a project. A major change is defined as any sponsor-directed alteration that requires a modification in a project's activity, location, or schedule that triggers a NEPA process or air quality analysis. And so that it lists below some of the common scope changes: engineering change, quantity change, location change, schedule change, things like that. And so this is all posted on our website. It's always there available for people to reference. Also the air quality significant definition is on our website as well. So if you ever need to refer to any of that, that's there. It's also included in the TIP narrative document. The TIP amendments are done on a set schedule, and so we do them every other month. And so this is what the TIP amendment schedule looks like for 2024. So we have the 6 different cycles. The amendment request due date is the first working day of the month. The public comment period opens the day that the TAC packet goes out. Then we discuss it at TAC, Planning Council discusses it, and then the public comment period closes 30 days after it opens. It's a 30-day public comment period. Once a public comment period closes, then that is incorporated into the TIP. It's sent off to CDOT to then be incorporated into the STIP. And so generally, those are the emails that y'all are copied on for any that are sent to the STIP contacts for amendments. We also even though this is the set schedule that we do, sometimes we don't have an amendment that needs to be done during that schedule, but then there are other times where something needs to be done sooner rather than later. And so we do have the option of doing an off-cycle TIP amendment. So any of the even numbered months, we can complete one if it's something that needs to be done sooner rather than later. And that's what we call an off-cycle TIP amendment. So administrative modifications are completed by staff, and they don't need to go through the approval process by planning council. And these are not done on a set schedule. They are completed as they are received. Generally, we say within 2 weeks of receiving a modification request, we will incorporate that into the TIP and send that off to CDOT to then be incorporated into the STIP. And so this is these are the smaller changes that can happen with a project. So a change between federal funding sources, a change in project funding that's less than 5 million of state or federal funding, and does not change the scope of the project. A change in local funding of any amount which does not completely remove local funding or change the scope of the project. A transfer between project years. A change of less than $5 million in a CDOT STIP pool. Changes in projects included in a CDOT STIP pool that are directed by the Transportation Commission. Addition or deletion of new projects which are not federally funded or air quality significant but are under $5 million. And then minor scope changes which do not meet the criteria of a major scope change. So just wanted to quickly go over the process for TIP amendments and modifications. The TIP amendments should be sent per the schedule that we reviewed, and I do have that linked, at least the 2024 schedule linked in this presentation. We also have on the TIP website the revision form, and that has been updated with the new format. So if you need to submit a revision, you can download that and fill it in and send that to us. We complete the revision and then we send it to CDOT. And as I mentioned, project sponsors or TAC representatives are copied on any amendment or modification. CDOT incorporates the revisions into the STIP, and then there is a copy of this STIP that is posted online that is updated periodically. So I know this is everybody's favorite thing, scope changes. If a project needs to change, if a project sponsor needs to change the scope of their project, the first thing I recommend is discussing it with NPO staff, and we can help you figure out how to move forward specifically. Most scope changes first come through the TAC, and so you would submit a memo and any supporting documentation to be discussed at a TAC meeting. And the TAC can decide one of the following. The TAC can determine that the revision is minor and therefore can just be done as a modification. The TAC could request sponsor provide more information and potentially bring it back for further discussion, or the TAC can defer to planning council, either saying we believe this is a major scope change and therefore planning council needs to approve it, or kind of we're unsure and want planning council's input on that. So that's what deferring to planning council is. And so then the three types of changes are the minor scope changes, the major scope change, and then if it is determined that that change is actually a new project. And potentially when we redo our TIP in the new year, when we adopt a new TIP, we feel like the description of minor scope changes and major scope changes needs to be updated. We can do that because it's always I know all of you have loved when I said that a minor scope change is something that's just not major. And it's not really very clearly defined what that should be. And so that could be something that we revisit in the future to kind of make a little bit more yes or no if it's minor or major.
Just to give some criteria, because it always feels
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah.
Like size of project, cost of project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the same vicinity? Is it a completely different project? Does it have some of the same benefits? Like some of those things that.
Yeah.
Well, like when we took our project from a mile down to a third of a mile,
Yeah.
that's a major change.
Yeah.
Or the I mean, we've all seen the cost escalations that we've seen over the last 3 years, right? And so we all are living the same realities as that.
Right.
So
And I think
some of that makes sense for minor even.
There was a project that, maybe would have said that it seemed major, but because of cost escalations, instead of doing 3 intersections, it went down to 2 intersections. So those are the kind of things that, it's per the discussion of what,
Maybe that flexibility is nice. I feel like it is good, and we have set some to planning council that felt like bigger changes, right? So maybe that flexibility. Yeah.
So for now,
It's a good laugh every year. So.
For now, we'll continue to bring that back and just think about that as we go into the next tip cycle, which will start in like February or something, if we need to clarify that more. So we also wanted to have this discussion because we're coming up to the time that we're going to start the process of our tip delay review. So wanted to talk about some of this before we go into that process. And so the tip delay review applies to all projects awarded funding by the NFRMPO Planning Council. And so this is all of the federal funding programs and MMOF. And this occurs at the end of each state fiscal year. And so the state fiscal year for Colorado is July 1st through June 30th. So that's the specific timeline that we're looking at when we're looking at the delay review. And the delay review is based on the milestone deadline outlined in a project application. So for construction projects, that is the advertisement date. And for non-construction projects, that's the issuance of a notice to proceed. And that applies to like bus purchase projects too, would be non-construction. And whatever that, specific notice to proceed looks like for those. So wanted to talk through what the delay statuses will look like. And so there are a certain amount of projects that will be subject to a delay review. And that is if your milestone deadline, so for the delay review that we'll be doing, it's for FY24. If the milestone deadline you had identified in your project application was within fiscal year 2024, so between July 1st of 2023 and June 30th of 2024. That's what we're looking at for those milestone deadlines. If you had an add date that was scheduled to be in that time frame, we will request information about your project. Did your project go to add by the date you said, or by the end of that fiscal year? So did it go to add by June 30th of 2024? If the answer is yes, then it is not delayed and we don't proceed with any further, we don't need to look at that any further. If the answer is no, the project did not go to add before the milestone deadline, then you must provide a new anticipated add date and also justification. So why did it not go to add before then? And first delays can be granted by the TAC, a first extension. Other projects that are subject to delay or subject to review are ones that went through the delay process last year, were granted a first extension, then we're following up on that. And then we would ask the same questions. Did your project go to admin in this next fiscal year? If the answer is yes, then it is no longer considered delayed. If the answer is no, then you have to provide the new anticipated add date and justification, and then that has to be approved by Planning Council. Any subsequent delays also have to be approved by Planning Council, and or Planning Council may determine to give additional extensions if your justification is reasonable, or they can determine to remove the federal or state funding from the project. If that happens, that funding goes back into our pools to be awarded to other projects.
Do we learn about this before council gets it? I guess it's always nice to be able to give them a heads up if there's something on there. We can sort of explain what's going on.
Yes, so the first part of that is that we request all of that information from you, and would bring it to TAC for discussion.
So we would know what's happening.
Yeah. Yes. All right, and so, like I said, we're gonna be starting on that process here pretty soon. And in the coming months, we'll be bringing that information to the TAC. So the next thing I wanted to discuss is the idea of funding obligation and then rolling funds. And so there is a very specific definition of federal obligation, and it is an obligation is a legal commitment, the federal government's promise to pay a state for the federal share of a project's eligible cost. The commitment occurs when FHWA approves the project and executes the project agreement. Obligated funds are considered used even though no cash is transferred. And that's what we go by when we're looking at the TIP, is if funds have been obligated or not. And so if funding is not obligated in any given state fiscal year, so if it's it's fiscal year 2024 and it wasn't obligated by June 30th, then those funds need to be rolled into the next fiscal year. So state fiscal year 2025. So that's when you'll see over the last month or so, we've been doing a lot of modifications where funding is being rolled from 24 rolled into fiscal year 25 rolled. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions. But first, I will mention most of any of the local agency projects that are managed by Region 4, that is done by Region 4. They submit those modifications, they track that. There are some projects that we request information directly from the project sponsors. That's most of the time the transit projects, DTR projects, bus purchases, things like that, and then a few other of the transit things and like planning funds. We generally initiate that process.
So maybe it was the CDOT ones. I felt like they went to council before we saw it sort of with council at one point. Maybe it was the stats, the CDOT projects, but it'd be good to know that we're doing that so we can give our council members a head up if they.
Are you referring to the inactives report?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that is also a very separate thing from like obligation and things like that. But that is a report that we include quarterly.
Okay.
So I believe it was in this this packet.
It comes to TAC first, and it'll go in the August council.
Okay. Just if we can see it here for a second.
Yeah.
So one thing that I also wanted to bring to TAC's attention is that projects are eligible for swapping funding years, and haven't necessarily seen anybody do this, and so that's why I wanted to bring it up recently. And so within NFRMPO controlled funding programs, project sponsors are allowed to swap funds one time with another project awarded funds in an approved COP project. And that's within the funding program. So we're talking STBG, it's only STBG, but if you have a project that is going to be a little bit later, if you know that it's going to be later than the year that you receive the funds, and there's another project that would like to go earlier, we can do that to swap the years of funding for those projects. It's not adding additional funding, it's not taking any funding away, it's just swapping the years from one project to another, which can just help with keeping up with expenditures.
So that's like with our next project, with phase 3 of 37th Street. It's scheduled for construction for next year. It's going to be funded through STBG. If the right-of-way acquisition takes longer than anticipated, because we're just getting started right now, and I'm dealing with 3 potentially combative property owners, we might want to push it to 2026. Is that something like?
Yeah, but it wouldn't, yeah. And so then you would look to somebody who was awarded, the first year of funding in a later year, 26, and see if they are going sooner than expected, or if they could use the funding sooner, and then we can swap that.
Right.
It can't impact air quality conformity, which shouldn't be an issue, but that, it's something that you do want to discuss with us before, moving forward, so we can make sure of that. And then the swapped projects will have their milestone deadline updated based on the revised first year of funding. So that can help you, with the TIP delay review, that milestone deadline would be able to be pushed out. So you wouldn't be subject to a review for that. So one thing I will say about this process is not going to be something that's initiated by staff. That would be initiated by project sponsors, and so would recommend you discuss amongst yourselves before coming to us with that. And that was all I had for the TIP policies. I will just mention that Jonathan's contact information is up here because he will be taking on the responsibility of the TIP moving forward. Questions? Thank you.
So when's your last day? When's the party? The Bon Voyage?
My last day is August 2nd, so the day after Suzette's last day.
I didn't see them. She must have left.
She did. She did.
I'm here. I'm here. Is that what you're asking?
Talking about Josie.
She's given the thumbs down periodically. So. We're sad about you leaving too. So you've set us up well, both.
Outside partner reports, there's handouts for the local bucket bed, regional transit agencies, and mobility updates. There's also handouts for June Planning Council, July Planning Council, Community Advisory Committee, and others.
I had hoped to have this story map created by this point, but that has not yet happened. But for our last Community Advisory Committee, we did a mobility audit in Loveland that went very well. And so we will be creating a story map, and that will be sent to our website. So that was the only thing I had for that.
Thank you. And we have a few more written reports, Mobility Committee, Quarter 2, 2024 TIP modifications in the project. And the CDOT inactive report, which I just glanced at. I'll get off that list here real shortly, but I'm only one project.
I'll check it.
I'm waiting for a friend to get something done. Then we'll be off the project and I get paid because I'm still waiting on the final payment. And the final item, roundtable, we'll start with my left. Anything for the roundtable, sir?
The roundtable. I don't have any major project updates or anything like that that will affect the group.
For Weld County, we completed our bridge across, on County Road 54, Prospect Thompson, and
It looks great.
quite
We
a,
haven't driven over. Good.
quite a nice project for us. Yeah, definitely. It's the ultimate width,
Yeah.
and it's a lot higher than the existing line bridge that we replaced, that was damaged pretty intensely in the 2013 flood. So certainly a major improvement there, and it gives us that right of way we need, that room we need to be able to build that ultimate. And speaking of which, we had our CIP, our annual capital improvements program meeting with our commissioners recently, and they were willing to push up some of those improvements on County Road 54 that we had kind of further out in the back years. So we're not exactly sure which cross section we're going to be building initially, but at least it'll give us some turn lanes and some of the nice things.
A lot more intersection work.
Yeah, a lot of intersection work and basically, purchasing the entire right of way for the full build out. And then, as development starts to happen in the area, maybe like pick up some of that to build the ultimate. I know we are, trying to make it as close as we can to the access control plan and that particular roadway. We meet what we agreed to in that access control plan as well. So some good movement on that corridor. It's good to see. And then obviously we've got a roundabout at County Road 13 and 54. That's going to be getting under construction here in 2026. So that'll be a nice improvement as well. So yeah, just looking at those intersections along there and looking at getting it built out. And just for frame of reference, this section I'm talking about is between basically Larimore County Road 3 or Weld County Road 13, so our jurisdiction boundary there, and then State Highway 257. So I know Greeley's had a little bit of interest in annexing a little bit of that, which kinks things a little bit, but we'll work it all out.
Yeah.
Now that's most of my update. Let's see. We're getting close with going under contract with our consultant for our Safe Streets for All Safety Action Plan, our Vision Zero plan. And so we'll, hopefully next TAC, I'll have an update on that, who we're going with and everything like that. So another good project for us in the county. That's all I've got.
A major update on the construction of the intersection of College Avenue and Trilby. We divided construction into 3 packages, primarily because of challenges with acquisition. And so we've identified all of the work for the 3 packages. Construction package 1 is underway. Construction package 2, which is mostly underground relocations and subsurface work, will be executed here soon. And then the surface package work for construction package 3 will come later in the fall. So things are moving forward there as well. We're trying to get our safe streets and all, safe streets for roads, or safe streets for roads, or IGA for our 2023 award executed, and we're working through a categorical exclusion with for some of our demonstration work, which is a little bit of a surprise. So if you did apply for demonstration work, you still have to go through a categorical exclusion for that, which was
surprising.
It is surprising. It's been a modified process, so it's not the full expectation you might get there, but we're coming close to being able to execute an IGA on that. So.
We pushed out our traffic on call and selected 4 consultants. We are now copying a lot of your neighborhood traffic calming and pedestrian crossing guidance. So that's going to be our first task that we've got on the way. We are hopefully finalizing our contract for our bridge project. That's going to be getting underway in the next couple of weeks. And we have a general engineering on call out. We're catching up.
thanks for letting us borrow all of your stuff. If you have any updates of what you wish you would have done differently in any of those policies, let us know. I don't have anything else, but thank you all for 5 great years. So I'm not leaving Fort Collins, so I will be around. But the job is with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Volpe Center, so I will be home. I'll be in Fort Collins, so.
Should join all the boards in touch.
You see the one.
Hi, everyone. I'm the new transportation plan one with the NFRMPO. As Angela said, I'll be working on the tip. And I'll also keep working on the new freight plan for us. And I'm excited to work with all of you.
Just a quick update, the construction has started for TAC in US 34. If you are in Loveland, I would avoid TAC until the fall, probably. Take US 34, you'll get right through. But it's good, it's going quickly and they're moving, so hopefully we'll get that project completed. It's been a much needed improvement in Loveland for quite some time.
Who's doing the work?
Colson got the contract and they're moving. We're doing a full closure. We also have water line work going on and concurrently at the same time. And so that Connell is doing that for our water department.
Okay.
So it's a busy, productive closure. Yeah. That's all.
As Anna Rose mentioned, I'll be taking on the NMOS stuff, so please be patient with me as I work through the process on that. The only thing I thought I'd mention is that we got our model several months ago, our new model, and so we've been receiving a lot of requests from folks. So just, as far as contact person, I am that person to contact about those requests. So so and like Jonathan said, I look forward to working with you moving forward with both these projects.
All right. Larimer County, we are starting our transportation master plan update. We're doing that in parallel with our Safe Streets and Roads for All safety action plan. So we've had a few meetings so far. We do have a stakeholder meeting tomorrow. I believe I've invited someone from each organization at least to attend. If you are not on that and would like to be, let me know. And we'll be doing public outreach events. We've already had one up at Red Feather. We'll have one in the port. We'll be at the Larimer County Fair in early August, and we're doing. We'll be down in Berthoud at a farmers market in a couple weeks, I think. So trying to get some public outreach as part of the plan. But again, if you want to be participating in the stakeholder committee, let me know.
A handful of grant updates. We've been kind of running around with our hair on fire in Loveland since we met last in May. The end of May, Loveland and Fort Collins sent in a joint consolidated rail improvements and safety, or rail infrastructure and safety improvements grant, or CRISI grant, to the FRA to do some station area planning for proposed front range passenger rail alignment. We also paired a LOMA grant with the Department of Local Affairs with that. We were successful with the LOMA grant, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that the CRISI grant comes through so we can leverage that LOMA grant to pair a little bit. And then the city also applied for revitalizing Main Streets funding through CDOT to do crosswalks. If you've been to our Boundary Parking Garage, there's kind of a common mid-block crossing there at 3rd Street that is not marked, but is used by a lot of people, and this RMS grant will pay to build some improvements to make that pedestrian crossing safer and easier for everyone to use.
And then we got a transit center.
Oh my gosh, I forgot the big humongous grant. Yeah, so the we missed them on the regional transit agency update, but they applied for, I want to say the 5th or 7th time, I can't remember, to a bus infrastructure grant through the FTA to build a building at our transit center on 29th or 37th Street in Loveland. And they were successful. So they pulled in, it's It's about a $4 million total grant. Most of the local match will be in kind because we've already purchased the land and done some improvements there. So they're going to build a 2-story building. We'll have a customer service area. We'll have bathrooms, layover space. So it should be not just an asset for our transit agency, but for the regional services that are going to start using that facility as well. So we're really excited about that and look forward to being able to get a drink of water as you're waiting for your cold transfer in Loveland.
I don't have anything, but if you could pull up the camera so we can have us.
I saw Suzette.
Suzette.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I just put it in the chat, but this is my last TAC meeting, so thank you all for all the work that you do in this region, and I really appreciate all of you and all of your all the work that you've put in. And so I hope to see some of you at the going away on August 1st. Other than that, keep up the good work. You guys do awesome work. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all your contribution, through your whole career here in Northern Colorado. We've been so fortunate to get to work alongside you.
There were 2 more online that had raised their hand. Jerome, somebody else.
Shady was first.
So online, go ahead. Shady, go ahead. Talking again. Jerome?
Okay. So for me, I'll be reaching out to you all here soon to schedule the RATC visioning exercise. So what we're going to be doing for the accreditation plan is I'll be meeting with every one of our member communities to discuss the RATCs in your community, strategic local connections, and begin the visioning process. So I just want to give you all a heads up that that's coming up, and I will be reaching out to schedule that.
Thank you. So at Evans, 37th Street is moving forward. We should be wrapping up construction, opening and getting it ready for at least for traffic before school starts on August 12th. We'll probably wrap it all up sometime in early September. I want to shout out to the CDOT traffic signal guys. They came and did some work on one of our intersections on Highway 85. It greatly reduces the amount of traffic accidents, police calls, and other issues, because that intersection was a total cluster for years and years and years. And eventually, we're going to get the all the side streets and service roads closed off, so that'll reduce the hazards at that intersection. But I want to put a shout out to those guys. So Josie, tell Greg and those guys from the traffic signals on 85. We appreciate that effort very, very much. That's all for Evans. Unless there's anything.
Can I ask one question? I saw a survey for CDOT active modes plan online. Is anyone familiar with that or connected to that? Are they going to that?
Yeah, so they are also updating their active transportation plan, so it's a separate survey from the one Jerome has sent out, but yes, that is a survey that they do have out.
Are they involving any local agencies in that process, or is it just internal to CDOT, or who from the region is maybe leading?
I don't know who from the region, but I think it's just being run out of, headquarters, so it's Annalise.
Okay.
All right, turn off the lights, go home, get back to work, whatever.